In this class we want to talk about managerial roles, and more specifically we want to talk about Mintzberg's 10 management roles. Mintzberg conducted research into the behavior of a group of managers. His observations identified 6 characteristics of managerial work. So there are 6 characteristics of managerial work that we need to look at first, then go on to look at the management roles. So the characteristics of managerial work are as follows. First of all, managers are required to work under tight time constraints. Generally speaking, managers must ensure that the work is done according to the schedule that's been set out. So managers work under tight time constraints. The managerial activity is varied, it's fragmented, often pressurized. Some activities are not structured or scheduled, but still require efficient processing. So the manager must work with a whole variety of circumstances. A whole variety of issues impinge on the work that's under consideration. And the work may not be fully articulated. The requirements may not be fully understood, or there may be parts missing, or incomplete components, or faulty workmanship coming through from previous processing. There are lots of issues that may confront the manager, and yet the manager must ensure that the work is good quality and meets the time constraint that's been given to him or her. Managers in general are interested in dealing with specific issues and current problems. They are not too interested in general issues and non-pressing problems. So by and large, the managers focus in on what needs to be done now. They're not interested or completely interested in general situations and non-pressing problems. They look at what needs to be done now and deals with that. So generally speaking, it's the way the managers go about their tasks, at least according to Mintzberg's findings. The manager is the main port of contact. They represent the business and interface with a network of other contacts, both internal and external. So it's easy to identify the organization with the manager. The manager is taking responsibility for the tasks, so therefore the manager in a sense is the organization. The manager is seen as the organization. It's the manager who's going to progress the work, make sure it's completed on time and to a good standard. The manager deals with the employees, deals with perhaps other managers, deals with management. The manager deals also perhaps with external contacts to the organization. So the role of the manager is pivotal in the day-to-day life of the organization. They have a tendency to demonstrate a strong preference for spoken media. Perhaps it's the case that managers are under such pressure they don't have a lot of time to commit ideas to paper or to record their requirements. They tend to rely on face-to-face contacts. They tend to rely on verbal communications to a large extent. So they're not people, generally speaking, who use a lot of paperwork and communicate via, let's say, emails or via written communications. They tend to go face-to-face and they tend to give verbal instructions. Managers must focus on their specific remit. Despite interruptions and pressures from work activities and the work environment, they must concentrate on what they're doing. They must get the task at hand completed. Then, and only then, can they move on to look at other issues. But they must solve the pressing problem, the one that is in front of them at the moment. They must deal with the current issue and make sure that the flow of work continues, and that the flow of work is in accordance with the time schedule that's expected of them. After all, they don't want to hold up production elsewhere. They don't want to hold up work elsewhere. They don't want workers and managers elsewhere to be waiting, to have to wait for their contribution, for their work to go through. So they must meet the schedule. But they have all sorts of interruptions, all sorts of distractions, which calls on their time. But despite that, they must concentrate on making sure that the work goes through, and it goes through according to the schedule. So these are the characteristics of managerial work as seen by Mintzberg. Now, the managerial roles. Well, Henry Mintzberg identified 10 roles that management undertake when performing their work activities. The 10 roles are further grouped according to 3 major classifications. So there are 10 roles that the managers must undertake. Well, these are grouped under 3 major headings. So the first heading, for example, could be interpersonal roles. This is where the manager is seen as a figurehead, as a leader, and as a source of liaison, a source of passing information and mediating between different parties. So the interpersonal role has 3 parts: figurehead, leader, and liaison. So that's 3 of the roles accounted for. Now, informational roles, well, it's to monitor, it's disseminate, and spokesperson. So 3 more roles there. So in total, between interpersonal and informational roles, we have 6 managerial roles: figurehead, leader, liaison, monitor, disseminator, and spokesperson. That's 6. Finally, we have decision roles. That's the manager who acts like an entrepreneur, looks at disturbance handler, handling, resource allocator, and negotiator. So here we have entrepreneur is 1, disturbance handler is 2, resource allocator is 3, and negotiator is 4. Add the 4 to the previous 6, and we've got 10, which is our 10 managerial roles. So according to Mintzberg, managers operate according to these 10 roles, and successful managers can be all of these things and be good at each one of them. Let's look at these in turn. How the manager effectively interacts with other people. This is the interpersonal role. So if we go back for a second, we see that we're dealing here with the interpersonal roles with figurehead, leader, and liaison. So it's the extent to which the manager interacts successfully with other people. That's the interpersonal role. The manager must deal with the employees within the section or within the department. And the manager may also have to deal with other managers in other departments and other personnel in other departments. The manager may have to deal with senior management, but also the manager may have to deal with customers. So as a figurehead, the manager represents the organization to the outside world. So the manager is seen as the organization to some extent by the outside world, because their contact with the organization is through the manager. So the manager is in charge of completing social, inspirational, legal, and ceremonial duties. The manager represents the organization. So the manager sees the organization and represents the organization. The manager must always be available to deal with people and agencies. So the manager is always present. The manager is always available when required. And the manager has got status and authority. The manager, by virtue of being the manager, has the status of manager and has the authority to make many decisions, has the authority to direct production, allocate staff, deal with issues surrounding staff, ensure that the work goes through on time. So the manager has got status and the authority to make sure that the part of the organization is run efficiently. Now, as a leader, The manager is responsible for hiring, training, motivating, evaluating, and supervising subordinates. So as a leader, the manager has got a lot of personnel, HR type activities. Must hire, must deal with the HR perhaps in the hiring process, training, motivating, evaluating, and supervising subordinates. So it's quite a lot of functions for the manager to be involved in there. Must create the structure and the environment in which subordinates work and are motivated. So the manager must lay out the work, must lay out the sequence of the work to be carried out, must ensure there's health and safety within the workplace, must make sure that the workflow flows logically until it's completed through the department. And it must observe and monitor the activities, not only to ensure safe working, but also to ensure efficient working, and make sure that the staff are properly motivated. So it should encourage the employees, provides prospects for career progression, and promotes and disciplines if need be. So it's making sure that the workplace is a productive one. Make sure that there is no bullying at work or unfair practices between the employees, unfair perhaps because of their activities to certain members of staff. But also some members of staff could be promoted, and it's for the manager to observe who could be promoted and what can be put forward in terms of career enhancement, and looking at incentives in general. What incentives can be given to the staff? So the manager aims to balance subordinates and organizational needs to allow efficient operations. The manager tries to strike a balance. If the organizational needs are for a lot of work to go through, then it's for the manager to ensure that the work is properly resourced and it's performed safely, and that the staff can work within their capacity to ensure that the output is good quality and also meets the targets set by the organization. In terms of liaison, the manager is responsible for maintaining good relationships outside of the organization. The manager is seen as the organization by many people, perhaps outside of the organization as well. So it's important that the manager represents the organization and portrays a sense of professionalism and authority when outside of the organization. Information and Communication Center. Well, it's important to have networking skills in order to build relationships. So it's important for the manager to have the interpersonal skills to build relationships and to network with managers from other companies, with suppliers, with distributors, and so on. Vital for information exchange because it provides access to databases, facts, or requirements. So the manager can interface with technical staff, ask appropriate questions, interrogate databases, retrieve information, and is fluent in technology, the use of the intranet, and is able to perform many of the production functions that are performed by members of staff. So the staff are inspired by the manager. They know the manager can do the tasks as well. So it's good for leadership. Informational roles. Well, the exchange and processing of information, that's all it means. So to be a monitor, for example, the management responsibility is to collect, analyze information, look at data from external sources and also within the organization in order to evaluate performance, well-being, and the company's current situation. So there's a lot for the manager to be involved with, to collect data on productivity, on throughput, on materials used, on wastage, on timings for jobs. There's a lot of data flowing within the department, and it's important that the manager is comfortable in the analysis and monitoring of that data, of accurately interpreting the data and taking remedial action for any failures should they be identified. Undertaking necessary procedures such as internal operations, external events, ideas, analysis and pressures are important in helping an organisation implement change, solve problems, develop opportunities and make appropriate decisions about the organisation. Well, organisations do develop. They change, the product would change in line with the customer requirements. But it's also the case that there may be change which is forced on the organisation through the action of competitors. And there are also lots of ideas constantly floating around about recommendations for different working practices, changes in the organisation, changes in the product, changes in the technology used. It all has to be analysed. It all has to be understood. And it's for the manager to take on this responsibility, try to understand the proposed changes, look at the changes in the organisation that those would bring about, and try to ensure that the organisation can successfully implement the changes. The manager must have a viable information system which involves building contacts and contracts and training staff to deliver this information. So the information system builds contacts, but it also enables contracts to be delivered, so that existing contacts are tapped into and used for the delivery perhaps of components or raw materials or for distribution, whatever it is that the manager is involved in. But also the manager builds contacts with possible new sources of supplies, new facilities from the outside which may be important in the future. So it's important for the manager to be seen as someone from the organisation that's known widely within the industry, who's known to different producers and to suppliers and distributors and so on. So the manager must have a good information system and must be able to recall information efficiently. So it's important that the manager has access to good computing facilities. The manager is also a disseminator. This means that they are involved in sharing information to other staff within the organisation. They should make information available, information which is understandable. It's been processed, it's been refined, and therefore can be accessed by other members of staff. The manager translates information to subordinates. For example, policies, rules, regulations and values. This information is then regarded as important or what the company believe or value, how they can make a difference to the organisation. So it's important that the manager takes the rules from the senior management and disseminates this amongst the workers, passes it on, interprets it, explains it, has meetings with the workers and explains the policy of the organisation and the direction in which the organisation is moving. However, sharing information is time consuming and difficult to arrange as staff may be busy with other activities. So it's for the manager to find slots, find time to be a disseminator so that the staff are kept informed about the organisation, how well it's doing, the changes that are being proposed, and also opportunities for training and for promotion and so on. So the manager is the disseminator of information to the staff. It's also a spokesperson. This responsibility in circulating information to internal and external sources, such as key influencers and stakeholders. These sources are kept informed of performance, current plans and policies. The manager may be seen as the representative of the company to external agencies, for example to the local press, who may want to have a story about the organisation or how well it's doing and what are its plans for the future and so on. And this comes through the manager. Again, the manager should be adequately briefed and should have facts and figures available to give accurate accounts of the organisation without divulging any secret plans it has in terms of its relationship with competitors and its future market activities. So for external sources, the manager is the key person to consult, as he is an expert in the field and the organisation. So it's important to recognise the manager as the expert within that area. In charge of strategy making process, therefore it's important for him or her to make appropriate links with outside parties. The manager has the authority, information and capacity for control over important decisions, and it's important that the manager is consulted by senior management in terms of corporate strategy and the direction the business wishes to travel, and asking regarding feasibility of proposed plans. So the manager is a person who is influencing the organisation, the direction in which the organisation is moving, as well as taking on all of these extra roles. Now let's move to the decisional roles, the manager's ability to make decisions. Well, the manager may double up as an entrepreneur. It may have the capacity to innovate and initiate change, and is involved with designing new products. Now, this may be a function of the management, it may not be, it may be that's a part of a separate function, but the manager would still have the right to intervene and make recommendations and suggestions. So to that end, the manager could also be seen as an entrepreneur. The manager is also in charge of the controlled change within the organisation. Any flaws or gaps that can be improved are identified and improvement programs are developed. So the manager is constantly on the lookout for areas where the organisation is acting suboptimally and putting in some remedial measures, some changes, some additional resources to ensure that there's efficiency across the whole area. And to that end, the manager is acting entrepreneurial as well. The manager is making decisions which will improve the efficiency of the organisation. The manager has the power to allocate responsibility to reliable subordinates and also to supervise and support the subordinates. So although the number of functions are large for the manager is capable of delegating and then managing the delegated staff to ensure that they are completing their tasks in line with the expectations of the manager. Now, Disturbance Handler, well, effectively resolves problems within the organisation. Whenever there are problems, the manager is the person who deals with the problems and deals with the organisation. They take charge when the organisation encounters unexpected changes. So when there is a big issue in the organisation, some big problem, perhaps the manager steps in and takes control and keeps control until the situation is resolved and it's handed back to a more normal working situation. The reasons for these disturbances may occur due to staff, resources, threats, or staff mistakes. Sometimes organizations, there's nothing malicious about the disturbance, it's just there are mistakes that have been made which upsets the workflow. It upsets the balance of the organization. It could be that orders placed with suppliers were not appropriate or were wrongly coded, so the wrong materials arrived, or wrong specifications, something of this nature, and the situation has to be retrieved. So the disturbance handler function falls to the manager. Management roles here involve working with their own initiatives, resolve the matter, evaluate, and take corrective action. So the managers simply get involved, understand the situation, understand the problem, and then try to resolve the problem. Now let's turn to the manager as a resource allocator. The manager allocates resources, including money, staff, materials, and time. And this means that they are scheduling time. They're able to schedule resources. They're able to program work, for example. They're able to authorize action. And it means that the manager is a resource allocator. They're allocating scarce resources here. Time, work, making sure that the work is done according to the requirements of perhaps the distribution section and what was the promises to the customer. It authorizes action, what should be done and when should be done. The managers have the ability to make models and plans in order to evaluate processes, so they can they can look at the processes required and try to model these to make sure that what's being done is consistent and logical, and it meets the requirements of the customer, and it's also efficient for the organization. So they are using resources efficiently. As a negotiator, this role is linked with the spokesperson and the figurehead and the resource allocator roles. So the manager acts as a negotiator when sometimes there are issues associated with perhaps the assignment of tasks. There may be issues with the staff who object to perhaps having to perform particular functions or performing functions in a certain sequence or something of this nature, and the manager has to intervene and negotiate and ensure that there's understanding right throughout. It's important that there is common sense applied in terms of the instructions given, but the common sense should also be understood by all who receive the instructions, and there should be good communication skills by the manager to ensure that he or she is clearly understood as to their requirements. The role is encouraged important negotiating activities with other parties and organizations. So it's important that the negotiator is capable of dealing effectively with other organizations or with government agencies or with various people who may be involved with the organization and who want to negotiate terms and conditions. So it's not just the staff within the organization, it could be transport contractors who want to renegotiate contracts, or it could be the local authority who have certain requirements over production or vehicles coming and going at certain times, and it has to be negotiated, and there has to be some sort of equity factored into the system so that the manager is able to get a fair result and a durable result out of the negotiations. The aim of the role is to secure resources and to arrange favourable conditions from others in order for success. So it's important that resources are used effectively, but the resources have to be acquired and they have to be negotiated before they're acquired. The terms for their use should be clearly understood, and the prices and conditions should be clearly articulated and understood. And it's for the negotiator to try and get the best terms for the organization in order for this to take place. There's also an issue of generalist and specialist management. Mintzberg identifies that management needs be both organization generalist and specialist. So the manager must be a generalist, looking after a wide range of tasks, and also a specialist, looking after a very narrow range. Operational imperfections and environmental pressures are examples here. Operational imperfections mean that a specialist must be involved who will ensure that the operational problems of the organization are dealt with and there's a smooth passage of production through the system in accordance with the strategic objectives of the organization. So the company may be operating a just-in-time policy, or it may be operating some sort of quality assurance or total quality management or whatever it is. And the manager should be familiar with the product and the processes and enable the workers to understand the requirements of the organization in the context of perhaps those quality measures that I mentioned. But also there's a generalist role of the manager, perhaps looking at environmental pressures, looking at the organization working in society and making sure it's got good carbon credentials, that it's got good green credentials, and it's behaving environmentally correctly, and it also has a good ethical reputation. It's behaving properly towards its suppliers, towards its workers, and towards its customers, and it's meeting the requirements of being a good organization within the society. So the manager could have very specific roles and also quite generalist roles. When there is disturbance of basic routines, the manager should be involved to deal with the specifics of what's required, but also ensuring that if there are any widespread effects coming off that they are dealt with. A good example here would be, let's say, the manager dealing with perhaps a machine breakdown, but the machine may be leaking oil or something of this nature into a local river. So there is an environmental impact as well, and the manager must deal with that as well as dealing with the machine breakdown and getting the machine back online properly. So dealing with the disturbance and getting the disturbance fixed. There's also the fallibility of the individual manager. It's important to note that managers can make mistakes and that the organization should have proper training and facilities for the management to ensure that their skills are contemporary, that they have got good competencies, and they're able to inspire the workforce by accurate leadership styles. So according to Mintzberg, the role of management is demanding, and that's what we've just seen. We've seen 10 roles for management in 6 different situations, and that is very complicated. So we've dealt with it here as if it was one manager taking on all of this. Of course, in practice there would be many managers and there would be division of labour within the management team. Some managers doing particular functions and others doing other functions. But there might be one manager overseeing all of it, and that one manager would have to have knowledge of all parts of the organisation and be able to intervene with the local manager, the line manager perhaps, to try and resolve issues and bring about good solutions. So management is complicated, and I think we could agree with Mintzberg on the final conclusion that the role of management is demanding. But that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.